Hello, and welcome to the closing ceremony of IWRA UNESCO's online conference, Emerging Pollutants, Protecting Water Quality for the Health of People and the Environment. Thank you for joining us to hear closing remarks as well as summaries of the themes that have been addressed during the conference. My name is Renée Martin-Nagle, and it will be my pleasure to serve as moderator of this closing ceremony. As a reminder, all of our speakers note that this session is being recorded. A few housekeeping reminders as well. We invite the attendees to submit your questions in English via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will address as many of your questions as possible in the Q&A session at the end of the closing ceremony. You will only see each question once it is answered, either verbally or in writing, when they will be displayed for everyone to see. Since we have a huge audience, if we don't have time to answer all the questions we receive over the next 90 minutes, we will try to collect written responses to place on the conference website following this event. Please note that the chat box is disabled during this session. However, we ask you to keep an eye out for any useful messages that may be shared in this box from the organizers and the moderators. You also have the option of switching on the automatic subtitles at the bottom of your screen if you have difficulty hearing. If you experience any technical problems, please Google Zoom Help Center or send an email to online.conference@iwra.org for assistance. And now, without further ado, we'll begin to hear from our speakers. And we're going to hear first from Abou Amani, who is Director of the Division of Water Sciences and Secretary of the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program at UNESCO. Abou?
Thank you very much, Renée. Good afternoon, good evening, colleagues and experts, participants. It's really a pleasure for me to come back after those 3 very exciting and intensive days of this online conference on emerging pollutant. We jointly organized with the International Water Association. My intervention will be much more oriented to convey appreciation messages because I believe that organizing such kind of event need partnership. And I would like really to appreciate the strategic partnership we have been having and will continue having with the International Water Resources Association moving forward. And also, I want to thank, of course, the participants, because without participants, their excitement, their contribution, there's no conference. And I was informed that 2,700 people were registered. Of course, after registration, for those who will be participating effectively, generally we have less than that, but at least more than 1,000 participants were able to connect. I think this is a tremendous achievement. And particularly also the fact that people are coming from around the world, 120 countries. So this is really a very important achievement. I want also to thank other key partners who contributed to the success of this conference. Within the UN system, of course, we have FAO, we have UNEP, we have WHO, and also we heard about OECD. So thank you for all your contribution, and also from member state and actions. I believe that the excellent contribution of the Water Research Commission in South Africa is recognized. I think we are looking forward in having such kind of contribution from member states across the board, and also from UNESCO Water family. I was informed that we had some chairs and centers of UNESCO Water family coming from Nigeria, Poland, and Sudan, who were able to join the discussions, and also our delegation, our member state representatives here were able to connect to listen. And this is really for us something which give us support energy moving forward towards the UN 2020 Water Conference, as we all know, which will be a watershed moment for all of us, for the water community worldwide. And I believe that the outcome of this conference could contribute to enrich discussions in New York vis-a-vis the science aspect. And in that regard, I want to invite all of you to join the movement, the coalition of the game changer on science-based global water assessment. I may recall during the meeting organized by the President of General Assembly in October, 24th of October, he requested new ideas, transformative ideas, which are called game changers, and 10 game changers were identified. And one of them concerned science-based global water assessment mechanism, because we know that challenges of water are so complex, so interrelated that we need science. We need more than ever science. And currently we are having a meeting in Paris here, discussion that science-based global water assessment. And I want to convey invitation to all of you, particularly to international, to IWRA. I want really to see you here, because we have already some associations, central association here. We have IHS is here. We have the International Science Council is here. So I want you also to join the movement. I want also from other UN agencies to join the movement, because we have many of them already. But we are looking forward to have a few of us and WHO. But we have already UNEP, we have WMO, we have UNCCD, we have UNDP. So we have majority of our partners coming down. So this is really my plea, my message moving forward, because that conference is very important for all of us. So let's keep the momentum towards the UN 2020 Water Conference. Once again, I want to thank you for giving opportunity to UNESCO to work closely with you, and looking forward to continue engagement. So thank you very much. Back to you, Renée.
Thank you so much, Abou, and thank you for making time for us in your very busy schedule. And now we're going to have a few words from the Executive Director of IWRA, Callum Clench. Callum?
Thank you, Renée, and thank you, Abou, for your kind words. Our partnership with UNESCO means a lot to IWRA as well, and you know, we've been doing more and more with each other over the past few years, and we look forward to continuing that work moving forward. So thank you again for your kind words. I'd also like to thank everybody here for joining us. I've been asked to talk about some of the future focus based on the discussions we've had over the past few days. But before I do that, I should also reiterate some of the thanks to the International Scientific Committee co-chairs, Sarantia and Gabriel, who are both here on the screen. You can see them, as well as a few people behind the scenes that you will have seen popping up every now and again over the past few days, including Ignacio and Monica, Songpil, Leonor and Awantika. In fact, Leonor was working up until she went into hospital to give birth. So that's dedication, to say the least, and we wish her well. And Mahmoud and Quarantine and the UNESCO team, there's been a lot of people working very hard over the holidays and everything to make this event happen. So thank you to them. And also I want to thank the panelists and poster presenters who have taken their time to share their knowledge and expertise with us over the course of this conference. So that you know, we received at least 200 abstracts, and we've heard over the past few days from around about 90 speakers. And as of yesterday, at least, we'd received at least 65 posters, which we've been mentioning throughout the conference, which you can view online now at the IWRA onlineconference.org website. So in my 10 minutes, and I have the timer going for myself. I know that we tortured all of you with the timer who were presenting. I'm also timing myself so I don't go over. I just wanted to say, first of all, I'm not an expert in contaminants of emerging concern. My area is more policy and sustainable development. But as a non-expert, I have to say that I found this conference incredibly interesting, and I've certainly learned a lot over the past few days. I think the challenge for us all now is how to share this research, not only within our community, which is clearly important, but beyond it, to all of the stakeholders who are responsible for managing water resources. as well as the industries out there that are producing and using these contaminants, and of course to the general public, raising awareness. And to do this, we really do need a common language that we can all understand. Water connects everything, and it affects every part of our world. So it also connects people. So the language we use around water resource management is clearly very important. When I go to social gatherings with people who aren't part of our water world, and I inevitably get asked at some point, what do I do? And I talk about IWRA. It's amazing that almost every single person I speak to has some story related to either the access of water and sanitation or indeed water quality. And one of the concerns that certainly comes up time and time again is that of microplastics, which have been discussed here, and plastics in the oceans and plastics entering the food chain and so on. It's interesting that the plastics issue has managed to really grab the public consciousness. But also as we scan the horizon, and it seems that public awareness of the risks associated with other contaminants is certainly growing, such as pharmaceuticals, especially around antibiotics and hormones, and of course PFAS, which we've heard a lot about again over the past few days. So when I raise these issues with the average person who is talking about microplastics, what I tend to see is an immediate reaction of fear and concern, which isn't really my motivation for raising the issues, but to really make them aware of the fact that there are other issues out there that we should be considering. And I think this is why the research, like what we've heard presented here over the past few days, and the policy tools to try and deal with these contaminants are so important, and so that people can see that these issues are being taken seriously, and we're trying to find solutions. As I think we heard in some of the presentations, even this week, the issue of contaminants of emerging concern is hitting the mainstream headlines, certainly here in Europe, as the European Commission made an announcement that PFAS exposure has an estimated cost of between 52 to 84 billion euros in annual health costs in Europe. So for instance, related to diseases such as high cholesterol or immune system effects and cancer. And there was another report also out in the newspapers this week about how a single freshwater bass or catfish contains the same amount of dangerous PFAS as a month's worth of drinking water. So PFAS, which are known colloquially as, certainly in the press, as forever chemicals, are interesting, and it's better to use that kind of language in a way when you're trying to talk to a broader audience. They can be found, of course, in various forms and are resistant to high temperatures and decomposition, which is why they last forever. There is now a proposal in the European Union to ban them. But of course, they're useful, and they're used in many, many products, from cosmetics to frying pans to fast food packaging. So if and when a ban comes into force, the question therefore, of course, arises, well, what are the alternatives? And how safe are those alternatives? And also within the press, I've seen that there's been economic impact discussions as well around such a ban. For example, one of the examples cited was that semiconductors require a coating of fluoropolymers, which are a PFAS, to withstand the intense chemical treatments involved in manufacturing them. So without semiconductors, of course, we can't have phones or computers and laptops, TVs, and all the other modern day appliances upon which we depend and our economies depend. So while it's easy to sort of maybe say, let's ban them, those bans may not be as easy as we think to impose. So it's clear, therefore, that the research that's been undertaken that we've seen examples of here this week is critical in trying to answer questions like these. We need to understand the impacts of these emerging and widely used contaminants, and a cross-sectoral approach is required. And as I said at the beginning, ensuring we all know how to share this knowledge to the broadest audience possible is so important to ensure that all of your hard work also has the best impact it can. And so that's really, I guess, as a non-expert, as a challenge I would lay down to all of you. Please, when you're communicating about your work, think about how you can communicate it in a way that can be accessible to a very broad audience. You'll shortly hear some summaries of the key findings from each of the 5 sub-themes for this conference. These will be used along with the rapporteur reports we've been collecting to draft 5 policy briefs that will use that accessible language to make sure that the messaging is accessible to non-technical people. So I want to thank you again for all of your hard work and for joining us for this really very interesting and relevant conference. Clearly, the work doesn't end here, it's just beginning. And we look forward to continuing to share your knowledge and expertise in this fast-moving area over the coming months and years. In particular, we look forward to hearing more of these discussions in Beijing at our 18th World Water Congress, which will take place in September, from September 11th to 15th this year. And you can see more information on that at www.worldwatercongress.com. And I think there'll be a video at the end of this session that will give some more information. And finally, before I hand back to Renee, I just also would like to again thank UNESCO for helping us to make this event free for all participants. This is the 3rd such online conference that's been organized by IWRA with the objective of offering a Congress experience to people who can't easily travel to exotic destinations to attend a face-to-face event. So thank you, UNESCO and Sarantia, for your generous support and helping us to achieve this objective of sharing this knowledge and expertise to the broadest possible audience. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Renee.
Thank you, Callum. And as you said, we are now going to hear from the rapporteurs of each of the 5 themes of the conference. We're going to begin with Professor Gisela Umbuzeiro from the State University of Campinas, who will summarize the conclusions of the theme on emerging pollutants in aquatic ecosystems. Gisela? Go ahead.
Okay, so the first one, that is, we really realized it, and I was stunned at how many people are working with emerging contaminants right now around the world. So it's really something that there is no go back, right? So the emerging contaminants are in the water, present in the water, and even if you don't monitor for them, if you use the compounds, they are going to be in the water. So sometimes we believe that each country needs to do their own monitoring. Maybe this is right, but maybe there are other things that you can put your money on and help better the environment. So of course, the amount or the concentration that we are going to find is going to be very much dependent on the treatment that the countries are using. And this is really, as you can imagine, in developing countries, we don't have a lot of developed treatment or treatment in place. So of course, the risk is going to be dependent on 2 things: the level of treatment and also the type of compounds that are used in each region. So maybe you will have a different compound that is going to pose more risk in one area than the other. So you need to know about the compounds that are there. And it seems to me that pesticides and pharmaceuticals pose greater risk, although, as Callum said, microplastic, it's a lot of attention, and it's good because finally people are realizing that, well, we are the environment. This is what people need to understand. There's no difference in that. What you do is going to reflect in your environment, especially in. So the other thing I want to mention is that I always say to everybody this: in the developing countries agenda, unfortunately, we have 2 problems now to solve: the old contaminants and the new ones. And this is a problem because when you try to talk to people from the government, they say, oh, we need to take care of E. coli now because this is a huge problem. I understand that, but sorry, we didn't do our job in the past, so now we need to do everything, because everything is important. Also, I think that efficient wastewater treatment with low cost, as pointed by Jaume Barceló in the first session, is really something we could do more in our countries. If we are going to put money in research for developing countries, maybe it's better to develop more research in technologies that are of low cost. And then, of course, we can do monitoring, but maybe based on the priority substance we are going to select. And finally, we need to take care of the mixtures effect. We cannot continue to be using just chemical by chemical and thinking that the legislation is going to solve all the problems. This is not true. For sure, you know, you can have a good norm in place, but if you don't have how to make sure that all the countries are in compliance, there's no way that this is going to work. So I don't think regulatory issues are going to solve everything, but we need to think about using other types of monitoring, like using bioassays and other things that are so developed right now. So I really believe that sometimes I am not so optimistic as in the past, but I keep working on this, and I think we need to continue to make sure that people are responsible for the environment. Not they are going to be afraid, like Callum said, this is very bad. We don't want people to stop doing things. We just want people that we will appreciate the environment, and then because of that, they are going to take care of it. So this is my message. Thank you very, very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Gisela. Let's move on to theme 2 then. And for theme 2, which is emerging pollutants and groundwater, we have Dahlia Sabri, Deputy Resident Engineer at KEO International Consultants, and she's also a director on the IWRA board. Dahlia?
Thank you, Renee. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I'm going to present the concluding remarks of on theme 2, emerging pollutants and groundwater. First, I have to say that we had 2 sessions for this theme with a total of 14 very interesting and informative presentations. Our main remarks from the presentations are the CECs in groundwater are defined in 6 major groups: industrial chemicals like PFAS, pharmaceuticals, anti-inflammatories, personal care products like sunscreens, cyanobacteria like algae, flame retardants, and nano materials. CECs are becoming more widespread in the environment, particularly PFAS, and as we heard from Callum, PFAS has a very severe impact on the human health, and there is a need to build a resilient framework for monitoring priority ECs in groundwater and reducing future impacts on human health. Most ECs in groundwater require more regular monitoring and analytical testing to improve the evidence base to inform policy for groundwater protections. We need to collect regularly more data and to do more lab tests to understand concentration trends and sources, areas, and degradation for better management. Countries should follow the European Commission to finalize legislation to eliminate the widespread release of PFAS compounds in biosolids from wastewater treatment plants. As we know that it's mainly also used in fertilizers and agricultural areas and released into and leached into underlying groundwater. We need more laws to hold manufacturers to accumulate for disclosing use of ECs. It's not only that we manage the ECs, and the idea is to have this banned from the source, not only to manage the impacts of the ECs leached in the groundwater. So there is a need for more specific globally on defining which ECs should be prioritized for regular groundwater monitoring. We had as I said, we have very, very interesting presentations, and presenters provided tools to assess the presence and the extent of toxicity of ECs through chemical risk analysis tools and GIS-based tools to assess the location and source areas of PFAS contamination contamination, and some presenters showed that they had initiatives to improve monitoring of ECs. Basically, to have a sustainable water resources management and development, we need to have capacity development, community engagement, political wills, which will accelerate achieving SDG 6 goals and environmental improvement beyond 2023. Thank you. Back to you, Renée.
All right, Dahlia, thank you so much. And now to summarize the third theme, which is emerging pollutants and wastewater, we have Ali Faraz, who is endowed professor of water security and water energy food nexus at Texas A&M University. Ali?
Thank you, Renée. Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to report on the theme 3, sub-theme 3. I think if I can get that slide, that would be great. Emerging pollutant and wastewater. Wastewater technology are vital in mitigating the effect of emerging pollutant. As you know, the major challenge for the globe right now is how to assure adequate water resources for everybody. There are no ways to create new water, so we need to optimize the water resources that we have. And in that essence, we need to reuse. Reuse is not something that we have a choice, but we have to do it to improve the resources available, and also, more importantly, to protect the environment. Because if not untreated, these wastewaters can contaminate our water resources. So there are limitations of the effectiveness of these methods in treating the wastewater, both water and also the sludges that results from that. And that's not surprising because you have different sources. You have wastewater coming from human, you have wastewater coming from animal production operation units. So even domestic water comes from industry, comes from hospitals, from different sources. So it's very important to identify the best option of treating these wastewater depending on its source, and also depending on the level at which the contaminations to be removed. So there are lots of research gaps in this area. Effectiveness of wastewater treatment and removing emergent pollutant. Also, the fate of these emergent pollutant in sludge and also in wastewater. If we're going to use this wastewater for food production, or if we're going to use that sludge as a fertilizers, so we have to be aware of, and we should be able to quantify that and to be able to remove them. Also, there are health concern about the reuse of these products. They fade to the groundwater recharge processes or agricultural production. The detection and the quantification of these emergent pollutant from the diverse presenters, there are different ways. Sometimes you don't have access to that data. For example, in Brazil, they use in one of presenters, they showed how to use pharmaceutical sales to determine the amount of these emergent pollutant use across the country, and also to understand their trends in water and wastewater. The effectiveness of some materials. So several talks evaluated different removal processes and technologies of removing emergent pollutant. So in some cases, ceramic filters, bamboo, so these are low-cost products, but the effectiveness depends on the type of pollutant, but also the end use of the product. However, some advanced methods like nano materials in removing the pollutant, some studies showed that use of decentralized water treatment methods versus specific area or site can give better results. So if you have a source a point source that you know, an industry that is a major contributor to that. So instead of treating the entire water of that area, you can specify and treat the water coming from that particular point source that you know of. More efficient material, for example, such as catalytic ozonation, activated carbon adsorption achieve in some of these studies 100% removal. Ibuprofen and gem fossil, also algae bioaccumulation and biodegradation of emergent pollutant. It's very hard to determine or to give a prescription that is valid for everybody. For example, in arid environments, like the study presented on Saudi Arabia said that oxidation ditches are more suited for their environment than other methods. So you can see the specificity of the method and depending on the location and condition of the hydrological condition, environmental condition, etc. UV could be more effective in some studies reported by one of the presenters. In conclusions, there is some need for cross-disciplinary themes. And in the study, for example, that reported on work that has been done in Botswana, saying that working with the industry discharge in Botswana to improve the compliance rates with the discharge and requirements. So there is a need to reach out to the different stakeholders in this process to work together in addressing these emergent pollutant and wastewater. I would like to thank my colleagues who contributed with the notes and provided some feedback on the different presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. And now we're going to hear a summary of the conclusions for subtheme 4, a circular economy approach, life cycle management of emerging pollutants, that will be given by Marian Horndewal, policy analyst at OECD Environmental Directive.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you to IWRA and UNESCO for organizing this conference. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so in session 4, we looked at the circular economy approaches or life cycle management of emerging pollutants. It was quite a rich or broad session, I would say. We've discussed antibiotics, psychiatrics, algal blooms, chlorine residual, colorants. So instead of summarizing all the presentations, we've tried to distill some of the policy relevant messages from this session, which are presented here on this slide. So first, a bit of theory on what is circular economy. The classical linear economy generates waste, and this waste eventually makes its way into water, causing pollution. Whereas when you look at things from a circular economy approach, the waste that's created in every step of the production process could or should be considered for reuse. And one of the keynote speaker, she drew our attention towards the fact that all water experts are experts in the circular economy because the hydrological cycle is always circular by definition. So we have all the knowledge and tools in-house. Now, what can we do to promote these circular economy approaches? First of all, innovation is very important. Pollutants can be processed to produce other products. And we've seen 2 cases. First of all, algae cyanobacteria, which were transformed into biofertilizers. And also fungi that were used in the production process of colorants. However, for these innovations to be successful, governments play a crucial role as they in stimulating research and innovation. A second key factor is communication around the safety of such circular products, especially when they are derived from pollutants. For example, in the chat of our session, there were lots of concerns about the safety of using cyanobacteria as a new product. So communication about the safety of those products is very important. Second, governments have a role to play, especially when circular approaches are not yet feasible. For example, when water is simply too dirty to be even used for drinking. Authorities have a number of tools they could be using. First of all, it seems evident, but technological approaches are important, such as good wastewater treatment technologies. But also, if your sources aren't good enough, can you look at rainwater harvesting or groundwater recharge or other sources of water? Secondly, regulatory standards were recommended in a number of abstracts, such as standards for effluents, for drinking water, but also for the quality of the freshwater environment. Thirdly, as was to be expected in our session, life cycle approaches were recommended. And by this, it means that producers, users, but also other actors in the supply chain of any products should be involved. So in the case of pharmaceuticals, it's not just up to the user of medicine, but it's also up to the doctors who prescribe medicine. It's up to the pharmaceutical companies to make sure that they design the right, the less harmful products. And lastly, of course, governments can be involved in stimulating innovation. The last key message is related to the science policy interface. In all the abstracts, we saw that there is a wealth of knowledge with academia and regulators on the presence of pollutants in water. In fact, many of our, or at least now, a few of our presenters, they got their data from water authorities. And so multidisciplinary teams are very effective in bringing this knowledge together and also in promoting new policies and technologies. I hope I did all the presentations justice. I don't think so, but this is a bit of a summary of what we felt were important key messages. Over to you, Renée.
It was a very good summary. So thank you so much, Marian. And now to summarize the fifth and final sub-theme, which is priority emerging pollutants in the hydrocycle, microplastics, nanomaterial, PFAS, and PPCPs. We will hear from Cassiana Montagnier, who is Associate Professor in the Analytical Chemistry Department at the Institute of Chemistry at the State University. Also, she's from Campinas, where Gisela's from. So go ahead, Cassiana, it's over to you.
Hello. Yes, we are at the same university and colleagues. Yeah, well, our team 5 discussed about the priority emerging pollutants in hydrocycle, and then of course we received at least 50% of the abstracts about the microplastics, which is not so surprising once this is a huge new topic and then need lots of research in that area. It's the hotspot of the research, and you could see this in our session in this discussion also. We could have one session dedicated only about microplastics, and this was clear how interesting it is and what is this developing in different countries. For summarize this main topics about this team, we could see that these emergent contaminants, technology transfer, education, and outreach are critical issues affecting our ability to reduce or control their emission. Of course, information and resource needs to follow globally. This event is a very nice example as how we can do more together, and then how this can make some difference in all of the research and policy make decisions and whatever, and this is very interesting. Again, we talk about the plastic pollution, and then if you think about what we saw in that panels, we could see that this is still a point of a divergence in terms of effects, source of identification. We don't have the protocol and this to understand globally how is this exposure and how this can affect the environmental in that sense. Also the transport, even pathogens and chemicals, and how this can promote a new challenge for this discussion and the removal. So continued work is much needed, and we could see how much work it has been doing in that topic all around the world. And the other topic that was discussed in the Team 5, considering this priorities situation, is about how the water scarcity is driving the development of new technologies and treatments, and study about the degradations and developing in situ removal for these compounds, for chemical compounds. Of course, we saw in other topics also that how this is depend on the region and the situation, and how it can affect different in different regions, right? So directly potable reuse was mentioned in different situations during this point, but it's being used in a limited area. Once faces a perception hurdle and lots of challenges still around that. Gisela mentioned about we need to, especially in this developing countries, that we still need to face old problems together with the new problems. And this is a good example about how this challenge can be in terms of water scarcity and water security in all of the world. So also we need to prioritize specific chemicals doing their toxicity, their environmental persistence, their values of indicators, but this needs to continue growing every day. It's important that are different tools, and different countries are using methodologies to try to prioritize their own contaminants that should be monitoring or using as an indicator for that reality. And this is important once we have 1,000 contaminants and the technology, especially for monitoring, and especially for monitoring that is assessed to do that in different situations, is still a challenge for that point. And finally, the limitations I think that we have to highlight is about the emergent analytical technologies that are emerging to identify emerging pollutants. And now we can see this clearly on the microplastic topics or PFAS situation, where we really need the dedicated instrumentation and dedicated studies to provide the protocol to have this as good tools to monitoring. Because you can see that this applicability on large scale is still limited. We also can mention about the studies how we have scarcity we have about the information about the PFAS pollution in Latin America, for example. And in my point of view, the main reason is because the technology, because the instrumentation and the cost of this analysis. So it not means that you don't have the problem, but it means that maybe you don't have this as a priority to be monitoring in our country or this developing countries, for example. So to conclude, I've been working with this emergent contaminants thematic for more than 20 years. And I need to say that we have been doing lots of compared to 20 years ago, but we still need more to do in terms of collaborative researches and make decisions globally to affect all of the regions at the same time. So I think that this was the main topics that we discussed in these two sections that we have about the Team 5 of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cassiana. Considering you've been working in this area for 20 years, you're the perfect person to summarize this sub-theme. As anyone who's been involved in one of these conferences is aware, chairing and co-chairing the International Scientific Committee is a lot of work, and you also learn a lot. So next we're going to hear from our two co-chairs of the ISC for this conference, who will present some conclusions and key recommendations. We have Sarantuya Zandaria, who is Program Specialist in the Division of Water Sciences in the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program at UNESCO, and Gabriel Eckstein, IWRA's past president and currently a professor of law at Texas A&M University and director of the Law School's Program in Natural Resources Systems. Sarantuya and Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Renée. Good afternoon, dear participants, and thank you, our members of the International Scientific Committee, who have summarized the key messages from each of the sub-themes. So during the past days, we have exchanged a wealth of new knowledge and research findings on this very important and timely topic of emerging pollutants and its implications on the health of people and on our valuable ecosystems. And actually, this conference has shown that the research on emerging pollutants has increased during the past years, and especially in other regions where 10 years ago, we hardly could find research on emerging pollutants. And we were very happy that this conference gathered research on emerging pollutants in Africa. We heard research in South Africa, Senegal, Nigeria, Sudan, Botswana. And so it is important also to really build research capacity on this very important topic in these regions. Likewise, research is very advancing in Asia, China, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka. We had very good quality research, and also Latin America, Argentina, and Brazil. The new knowledge and the research presented in this conference covered all aspects of emerging pollutants, from different pollutants types and their occurrences in aquatic environments and also in groundwater. And I think the sub-theme 2 of this conference has been one of the first scientific gatherings focusing on emerging pollutants in groundwater. It's really important because once groundwater is polluted, it's very difficult, if it's not impossible, to eliminate or restore groundwater resources. So we really have to pay very important attention to prevent groundwater pollution by emerging pollutants. And also the conference also covered research on risks and threats to human health and ecosystems, because these diverse pollutants have potentially serious impacts on human health, on aquatic ecosystems, on biota, not only in freshwater aquatic ecosystems, but also in marine ecosystems, because we need to ensure that our ocean is healthy in order to provide food security for the growing population of the world. The conference has been really rich in presenting solutions to address emerging pollutants, and the solutions covered not only technological solutions, but also policy solutions, even new approaches such as the life cycle management or circular economy approach, which has been very nicely summarized by Marine as sub-theme 4 recommendations. And the research also were of focusing on policies, how to shape or develop new policies, and which are the best ways to develop policies to address this very complex issue. So the rich knowledge presented in this conference highlighted the urgency of addressing emerging pollutants, and also gave us hope that this problem is, we can address this problem, and science play a very important role in addressing this problem. So it is not pessimistic. Actually, we have to acknowledge that this is a serious problem, but we also have to acknowledge that we can mobilize science, we can do more science to address this important problem. Let me highlight just a few key points from this conference. So one was that there is an emerging scientific consensus from this conference that this emerging pollutants are widespread worldwide. It is ubiquitous was really, I think there is a consensus on this one. Also, there's another consensus that it's complexity for the diversity of different types of pollutants, complexity for the magnitude of the problem, as well as it is interactions, complex interactions with human and natural systems. We also agreed, and I think this conference has highlighted that there is lack of knowledge and our scientific understanding is limited. What we know or what we believe to know is really just the tip of the iceberg. And actually we need to do more research, more science to know more about these pollutants, how these pollutants may impact our humans or ecosystems. And for this, actually, the conference highlighted the need for monitoring and data. And I think this has been repeatedly highlighted in different research presented in this conference. Also, the promising solutions were shared, and I think these have to be also, I think, further developed or disseminated. And some, let me just highlight some of them, but if I don't list all of them, please. I think that what I will highlight would not do justice to the rich scientific approach that were presented here. Just two things with regards to monitoring and assessment. Of course, we need to have more data to improve our understanding on emerging pollutants, but there are also scientific approaches which can help to do this with less efforts or with less investment in monitoring. For example, modeling could be a tool to understand the complexity of the transport and fate of the emerging pollutants in aquatic environments, as well as to identify hotspots at the worldwide level or at the regional level. Another scientific approach was the water fingerprinting or non-target assessment to prioritize certain pollutants, because some of the research, actually, it was very nice to have some social science research on how to do research on emerging pollutants. So we have to develop a research that are targeting certain pollutants or targeting certain stakeholders. So there was really clear consensus that we need to prioritize certain pollutants. And I think one of the pollutant that was highlighted was PFAS, because it's a legacy pollutant. And actually, it's not an emerging pollutant. It's actually pollutant that we have to deal for that has been generated since our last generation. So this actually highlights one important point that we have to think when we talk about emerging pollutants in the future. So we have to be able to anticipate the problems that may arise, or the new types of pollutants that yet to be detected or entered into the environment, and that our future generations have to deal with it, because emerging pollutants that we are identifying and monitoring today are not the only ones. There might be many more. So with regards to solutions, it was highlighted that we need to have affordable, cheap and reasonable solutions, and it's always better to prevent through innovative approaches, life cycle assessment or circular economy, or some other approaches involving other stakeholders. Actually, the water sector is not the main problem. Water sector is the transport mechanism or vehicle of how these pollutants enter into our aquatic environments. Another key point which was highlighted is that not only technological solutions are important, but are also important to consider nature-based solutions and incorporate local and traditional knowledge, because that's also where we can find very good innovative solutions, because tradition doesn't mean non-innovative. Tradition can be innovative. So now with regards to what we do with this rich knowledge presented in this conference, as Callum said, it will not stop here. We will share it with different stakeholders through different platforms. And actually, I would like to repeat the word which was mentioned yesterday in a high-level panel, that scientists and we need to be generous in sharing scientific knowledge. And that's actually where the open science concept principle can play an important role. And UNESCO is promoting open science. And this conference, all the researchers here who have contributed to this conference actually has contributed to the open science. Another key aspect is we have to also take into account culture as a tool to raise awareness, engage citizens, and educate people, because by educating people, we can change their behavior, which can really make a big difference in terms of reducing the emissions of these pollutants. We also need to be proactive in both how we do research on emerging pollutants and how we implement solutions. And that is very important, and I think the scientists also need to think about being proactive in terms of doing research with forward-looking perspective. The key objective of this conference was to bridge science policy interface. And it is really important that we communicate this wealth of new knowledge and research findings to policies and other policymakers and other stakeholders in order to be able to develop science-based policies to manage emerging pollutants in a rapidly changing world for water security of the growing world population, and also for the health of planet, ecosystems, and biodiversity. So this has been a really rich conference, and it is just the start for a very scientific conference, which will reach to other stakeholders. And I would like to hand over to Gabriel for your summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Serantuya. That was
Callum, you're muted. Or, sorry, Gabriel, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was saying, thank you, Serantuya. That was really a wonderful, wonderful overview of the conference and all of the different important points that kind of came out of the program. And what I'd like to do is maybe just build on some of the points that Serantuya made and others highlighted during the conference. Also, my perspective coming into this is I'm not a scientist. I'm coming from this from a law perspective. I'm a lawyer, a law professor, and I look at these issues from a policy, regulatory, legal perspective, and also in terms of what do we do now with all this wealth of information. There's been so much information shared here and exchanged, and it's really been a wonderful experience. Having chaired the second high-level panel, one of the questions that was posed to the panelists was, if you can capture in one word, sort of the most important thing to you, what would it be? And those 4 points that the panelists raised, I think, really give me a great structure to present sort of my ideas, my perspectives on this conference. The first one, it's been mentioned over and over, but awareness, knowledge exchange, research development, and so on. We have to do a better job of becoming aware. We have to do this in a number of ways, in the sense of developing the research, expanding our monitoring efforts, generating the information about the problems that are out there and how we're going to deal with them, but also how are we going to share this information? There's been a lot of conversations, a lot of comments made about transferring this knowledge to the developing world, transferring it to policymakers, but also, really importantly, transferring it to the public. I think we have not done a very good job in making the world and the general public really aware of all these problems and the scope of the problems and the extent of the problems. When we talk about microplastics or PFAS or pharmaceuticals in the environment, many of you who are scientists and are researching and are looking at this at a really micro level, and you realize the dangers, the concerns, the challenges. For the general public, okay, we hear about microplastics, but that's over there out in the ocean. We hear about pharmaceuticals, that's out there, but yeah, they treat it out, right? Somebody fixes it, that problem. They don't necessarily recognize when you take your coffee, your tea, or your water, you're drinking microplastics, because many of our treatment systems just are not set up to take those out. You're drinking pharmaceuticals because many of our treatment systems are not developed enough in so many parts of the world to really treat this out. And so sharing this information and the level of concern, I think this is one of the challenges that we have before us in terms of bringing awareness and making sure that we all are aware to the extent that we need to be aware of all these challenges and concerns. So all this collaboration, all this sharing, it has to go beyond our community. We can talk to each other all the time and we understand the language, but we need to now translate it into language for the broader community, not just the policymakers, but really the broader community. And that's where I think we're going to have a better impact with awareness. And whether this is done through UNESCO, through IWRA, all these organizations, we all have a role in the awareness. So that's the first sort of key phrase, key word that came out of what I caught on to or latched onto in this conference. The second one is prevention. People have mentioned life cycle approach. They mentioned circular economy and so on. I go back to something very, maybe too simplistic, but I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The effort made in preventing, the amount of money that we can spend in the prevention is really minuscule in the amount of money and time and effort that we're going to have to put into the treatment, the removal of these products or these substances from the environment. The fact that we all in our bloodstreams have these contaminants. We are drinking them, we're eating them, we're living with them right now, and they're causing negative health effects. They're causing negative effects on the environment and on the world we live in. It is now, and it's pretty dire. In some places, it's very dire. And the amount of effort and expenses that we're going to have to put into removing and fixing the problem is tremendous. If only we would have thought about it at the prevention stage, at the in a life cycle stage. Could we have done something earlier on to minimize the contamination, minimize the dispersal, minimize these products, these items, these substances from getting into the environment? So the idea of prevention really, I think, it is critical. Also, in terms of evaluating new products and new substances and new material that we know we need, but we need to get a better handle before they go out into the world, into the environment, and at a point where, like PFAS now, it's in everything, and now how do we remove it? It's going to be a really complicated, really challenging problem to remove it from the environment, from our bloodstreams, from our lives. If only we could have done something to prevent it from getting into the environment. So awareness and prevention. The third topic that I think caught my attention was certainly in many of the conversations that have been had here during the sessions, treatment. Okay, now that it's out in the environment, it's out in our water, we have to do something about it. We can't just let it go. There has to be more effort made on treatment and different approaches to treatment, whether it's at the wastewater level or the water treatment level or in the environment. Soil, we have soil that's contaminated. Do we need to remediate areas of land? What do we do with all the ecosystems and the habitats that have been contaminated? How do we treat those? These are things that we need to put more effort into because of the consequences. We didn't do it at the prevention stage, and now we have to deal with it, and we do have to deal with it. It's just something that we can't get around it, and it's everybody's responsibility. We can't just point fingers at private sector companies or governments not taking responsibility or so on. It's now something that everybody's going to have to deal with as a policy matter, as a legal matter, and so on. But having said that, there has to be something about this last point, which is accountability. And by accountability, I don't just mean to finger point. I don't just mean to say, that's the culprit, you're responsible, you should pay for it, and you should deal with it. We all have to be accountable because we are all part of the problem. We enjoy all these products. We enjoy plastics. We enjoy medicine. We enjoy the lifestyles that we have. Of course, in the West, we have a higher standard of living because we enjoy these products even more than places in the developing world. Accountability and responsibility have to be part of it. There has to be a conversation about, yes, who is responsible, but also who is going to do something about it, and how are we as a collective society, not just in Europe, not just in North America, but globally, how are we going to take responsibility for dealing with all of the problems that we've created for ourselves, for our environment, for our world. I don't think that this topic was dealt with enough in this conference or anywhere else that I've seen. I think this is something that has been brought up on a number of occasions. But accountability, and again, I'm not saying this in the sense of finger pointing, but in a sense of how are we collectively going to be accountable for the problems and the challenges that we've created? What are we going to do about it? And again, I'm looking at this from a non-scientific point of view, but the science has to be there. Can we do it from a scientifically sound approach in a way that won't cause further problems, that won't complicate the situation even more? Can we do it in a way that is going to recognize the particular challenges that maybe women have, because they're the water bearers. They're the ones who very often are in the front line of dealing with water contaminations because they're carrying the water, they're bringing the water, they're doing the farming and so on, and they are often first in line to being affected by these problems. Can we do it in a way where marginalized communities are supported and assisted because they don't have the resources? So accountability here is a critical idea. Again, I don't think it's been dealt with very much enough in this conference or anywhere else, and I think this is something that's needs greater attention as we move forward. Now, as we move forward, where do we go from here? We've got the UN Water Conference in New York in March. We've got the World Water Congress from IWRA's World Water Congress taking place in Beijing in September. We're going to have the World Water Forum taking place in Indonesia in 2024, and so on. We have to bring this topic to all of these venues. This is critical. As you can tell, one of the key messages that I heard over and over and over was, it's a problem. It's a big problem. There are so many contaminants. There's so many chemicals, endocrine disruptors, pharmaceuticals, plastics. They're out there and they're creating serious health impacts on people and the environment. We have to keep raising these issues at all of these different venues. Now, that's just at the global level. We have to do it also at the local level. It has to be done in your town halls. It has to be done in your legislatures for your local communities and your national assemblies. Otherwise, the message won't pass on to the broader community. All of you that are here today listening to these sessions and participating and presenting your research, most of us, we talk amongst ourselves. We know the issues. We have to carry the message far beyond to the greater public, the greater populations. So that's sort of my perspective on the conference. I want to thank everybody for participating, for giving for sharing all your knowledge and information here. I think Sarantuya, we'll move on now into that next session where will need the slides up. So
yeah, maybe Renée, would you like to let the
yes,
to respond questions before we thank everyone? It's Renée, up to you. Over
Please.
to you.
Okay, and for the Q&A, I'm going to ask Monica Garcia Quesada to pose a couple of the questions that have been sent to us.
Thanks. Thank you, Renée, and thank you to all the speakers and the reporters for their interventions. We do have quite a few questions. Some of them have been answered in writing. Some of them are policy related. Some are more technical, and I'll go through them and I'll invite you to answer. One of the questions is about the potential solutions and what the possibilities are for dealing with emerging pollutant. The question is, are the economic tools, infrastructure, information campaigns? Is it possible to stop using one-use plastic across the world? For that, perhaps I can invite Marion from the OECD, as the OECD has played a role on that.
Yeah, sure, with pleasure. We at the OECD, we always say you need a set of tools, a combination of tools. So yes, you need economic instruments. The polluter pays principle, I think, is a very important example where polluters are asked to pay in terms of charges or taxes if they pollute. Of course, your charges have to be high enough to reflect the actual cost of the pollution. But you also need regulation. You need standards as to what kind of water quality you would wish for your environment, for your effluents, but also standards in terms of treatments. So you need those. And as you rightly say, information campaigns are just as important. Or, for example, working in voluntary agreements with industries to see if they can help you reduce pollution, because maybe they're not aware and they're very willing to support. And also, when you asked about technologies, if you use economic instruments, you can also recover some cost of, for example, your wastewater treatment, because people are actually paying for your services to clean up the water. So it's very important to always have a set of policy tools. Yeah, and if you're interested, the OECD has done a lot of publications on this, so feel free to have a look at those. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question concerns the champions for the next policy steps. The person is asking, thank you for the great opportunity to see how other scientists from different countries are working on similar topics. Some of them, quite a few from Brazil, they mentioned. They ask, what comes next? Who are the champions for the next policy steps for raising the profile on emerging pollutants? I wonder, perhaps, Sarantuya, would you like to take that question?
Thank you, and I apologize if my response is a little bit biased towards UNESCO. And of course, we are not the only ones raising the profile of emerging pollutants, but within the UN system, UNESCO is one of the organizations which started to address this issue of emerging pollutants. And I remember when we started with a smaller project back in 2009. And then we, from this small case study, we developed it into a major project from 2015 and 18, funded by the generous support of Swedish Development Agency. And that's where we started to develop case studies and massive training in 4 regions involving about 400 water professionals and researchers from 110 countries on emerging pollutants. And actually, so all these activities of UNESCO in the past 10 years has helped to raise the profile of emerging pollutants within the scientific community, as well as at the international level. And of course, other partners such as IWRA and other UN organizations have also been active in this field. So we will be, of course, promoting this important topic. And why UNESCO? Because of the science and the role of science. Because it's a new issue and we know little about them, and we need to have more science and more research. That's where UNESCO had to play an important and leading role. And of course, we will be very happy to further this subject with all partners at the international and national level. to mobilize more research, more science, and to bring the science beyond the water sector. And actually, this 3-day conference has highlighted that there is no one solution to emerging pollutants, and the solutions need to have a multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approach. And actually, these pollutants originate from other sectors, so it's much more effective to involve stakeholders to be able to find solutions in other sectors before these pollutants enter into our water resources. So, and of course, there are, in terms of champions in policy, I think Europe has been very active. They have developed several watch lists, and we have seen this in our keynote. So there is lots of experience to learn, and also we can also learn from developing countries. I think South Africa is a champion in terms of research. We see that there is really strong research capacity in other countries like Brazil or China, India. So it is an emerging issue in all countries, and we have seen that the research is being built, and now it is really time that we can do more collaborative research as highlighted by Cassiana, and to have more scientific research to multiply our efforts. And I think multiplier effect is much more stronger than we do individually research. Thank you.
Right. There have been quite a few questions about monitoring, perhaps the need to monitor and to improve the tools for monitoring emerging pollutants. Gisela, would you like to elaborate on your answer to the topic?
Yes, I think there are still a lot of monitoring tools that need to be developed, chemical basis, but also I believe we need to forward to the mixture effects and use bioassays to do the monitoring based on the type of mode of action of the contaminants. So this can really have an impact in making things simpler and more effective.
Do we have still time for another question? There is.
I think we do. One more question.
Right. There's been an interest on solutions that are economical, that are possible to be implemented in countries that do not have the resources. Perhaps Ali, would you like to elaborate on your answer to that question about solutions, economical solutions?
Thank you, Monica. I think it's an important question about the best solution to a particular problem. As I indicated in my written reply, it depends on the condition, it depends on the type of product, it depends on the end use of the product, the end use of water. So if you're going to use the water for drinking, it requires much more stringent requirement than if you're going to use it for example, to agriculture production. So the method depends on the condition too. So as I mentioned in my talk, for example, you don't need elaborated method in arid environment when you just dispose of it safely in a ditch with oxidation that has to do with that. So I think it depends on the condition, and there is no need for sophisticated method, because as one of the studies showed, even bamboo sawdust can do a lot without having to have a very sophisticated carbon exchange resins or things like that. I would like to state one last statement here is about, I think Gabriel mentioned that, is about the prevention, which is key here. I think what we need to do as a society in general, we need to connect people back to their environment, because there is a loss of connection. When you turn the water on, you don't know where that water comes from. If we teach the people about the water cycle, where does it come, where the contamination come from, etc., so people are more aware. They have a sense of stewardship of the water resources that they have, or any other resources that we have. So this is a key, and I think this is what we need to maybe some of the recommendation is the outreach, the stewardship, are key in helping us dealing with these emerging contaminants.
Ali, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we, as humans, feel very disconnected from the environment, and we are part of the environment. We are one of many, many species, and we need to become more aware of that and our impact. Now we're going to shift back to the two co-chairs who have a few closing remarks. Gabriel and Sarantuya.
Yeah. So closing remarks, really want to convey our great thanks. If we can have the slides on here. What we really want to say is thank you to everybody who participated, everybody who engaged. This has been just a spectacular program focusing on emerging pollutants. If you go to the second slide, please. If you look at just at the numbers, the extent of participation has been absolutely amazing. I think the one statistic that's missing on here is that we have more than 120 countries represented in the audience here in terms of all the registrants and so on, coming from every part of the world. So this has been just an absolutely fantastic program with great collaboration and great participation with everybody from around the world. And we really, really do appreciate all of the engagement and all of the interest that has been generated here. Next slide. What we've really tried to do is to bridge here the science policy interface and to create a platform, a space for everybody to come together and to be able to engage on these topics, in the realm of emerging pollutants, but bring in the scientists and bring in the policymakers, bring in members of stakeholder communities, members of the private sector, and so on. And this is what we have been really happy with the turnout that we have had. Here, scientists from very high-level institutions, from international organizations. We had a Stockholm Water Prize laureate participating on today's high-level panel. We've had researchers and experts from all over the world, just some of the countries mentioned here, South Africa, China, and so on, from FAO, UNEP, WHO, UNESCO, and so on. And this has been just a really wonderful collaboration. Next slide. But in terms of giving thanks, I have to highlight our International Scientific Committee, who have been working for the past, I think, 6 or 7 months, incredibly diligently. We had a bit of a condensed schedule, and then we had a bit of a summer break, and then we had the winter holidays in there, and everybody has just come through, put so much effort. All of you, we really, really thank and appreciate all of the efforts that you put in terms of organizing the sessions, reviewing the abstracts, helping to promote, helping to conceptualize what the whole structure of the program. And thank you for all of your efforts. And I'm going to turn it over now to Sarantuya for the next slides.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I would like to continue with our thanks to very important work and hard work over the past many months of the UNESCO and IWRA team, who has ensured the very smooth and successful running of this conference. And I would like to ask our colleagues, Callum from IWRA, Callum Clench, Ignacio, Monica, Sungfil, and Elizabeth to open their cameras. We would like to thank you. Also, the important work of the UNESCO team, led by Mahmoud, Radwan, Corentin, Francesco, Tatiana, and Georgia. Also, we would like to ask you to open your camera so that you can see our colleagues who have worked so hard on the organization and technical coordination of this conference. So is there any way that we can see your cameras? Okay, we will do it afterwards. Okay, then
afterwards. Yeah.
Afterwards, and then the next slide, the important work and hard work of our communications team, both at UNESCO and the International Water Resource Association. So my colleague Ayuk, and Chantal, Alexander Otte, Raquel Paramo, Alfaro, they were very busy communicating this message. Likewise, Leonor and Avantika, and Leonor actually has worked into her maternity to communicate this about this conference. And actually, not only they communicated information about this conference, they helped to raise awareness about emerging pollutants, because they have been tweeting about emerging pollutants during the last 4, 5, 6 months. So you have not only contributed to communicate and share knowledge about our conference, but also about emerging pollutants. So big thank you to all of you. And next, we would like to thank all our rapporteurs who have contributed to prepare reports of the different sessions: Anup, Najibullah, Dahlia, Cassiana, Mohamed, Tatiana, Atikur, Nusrat, Ashraf, and Piero. So sorry, I'm just reading the first names. And we would like to thank your important work, and this has been really useful, and your reports will be very useful for the compilation of policy reports, 5 policy reports on 5 themes of the conference that IWRA UNESCO will publish. So next slide, please. And so we would like to thank all the contributors, audience, the researchers, water professionals, government officials, NGOs, private companies, UN organizations, FAO, OECD, UNEP, WHO, International Water Associations, and UNESCO constituencies. And you were present, and over 1,000 people actually connected to this conference. Next, please. And of course, this is just the beginning, and we will convey this message in different platforms through policy briefs and scientific book, and also UNESCO will release a media release, and some of the contributors may be contacted for interviews. So thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're reaching the end. On behalf of UNESCO and IWRA, we thank all of the speakers for sharing with us their research and insights on this important issue of emerging contaminants. And we thank all participants from around the world for your participation in this session and all of the sessions. As a reminder, we will collect written responses from presenters to any remaining questions we have received, and will place the answers on the conference website. We also want to remind you all that you can see an excellent selection of submitted conference posters online on the website, which is www.iwraonlineconference.org. The posters can be found under the posters menu. And if you have any questions on the posters, you can send an email to online.conference@iwra.org, and we will contact the poster authors to respond to your queries. With regard to the PowerPoint presentations, they will also be made available soon on our conference website, along with video recordings of all of the sessions. We hope that this conference has raised your awareness of emerging contaminants in water and perhaps inspired you to take actions within your spheres of influence. Thank you again for your time and attention. This conference is now officially closed, and we urge you to stay with us for another 2 minutes to learn about the World Water Congress taking place in Beijing in September of this year. Thank you very much.